Hello and welcome to the business interview. I am Marcus Carlson. Today we're at a conference here in Paris that's taking place in the lead up to the G20 summit in Cannes at the start of November. And one of the participants in this conference is the head of the World Trade Organization, Pascal Lamy, and he joins me now here in this impromptu studio. Welcome to the program, Mr. Lamy.
A pleasure.
Now, one of the questions that's going to take center stage at the G20 summit is, of course, the Eurozone debt crisis. This week, Eurozone leaders have come up with a deal in an attempt to ring-fence that crisis. What do you make of this deal?
Well, I believe it's a major step forward at a time where it was badly needed. So I don't think European leaders had any real other choice than moving forward. So it's a big step at their level, which, of course, will need to be implemented, detailed in the weeks to come, and the ability of the European system to implement these decisions, the speed with which it will be done, will have a crucial impact on the final result of these decisions.
Now, the initial reaction from the markets has been pretty solid so far. But is this deal, this ring-fencing move by Eurozone leaders, is it the big bazooka that many people were talking about before this crisis summit?
If it is implemented quickly, rapidly, vigorously, my answer would be yes. If a few weeks or months from now, people are still looking at, how is it going to happen, and who's going to do what, and what exactly will be the amount of this or this, then my answer would be no.
I was going to say, you mentioned a lot of ifs there. There is still a lot of risks on the table by the sounds of it.
I'm used, both in my previous European life and now in these big summits, where politicians are confronted with major issues. They clinch a deal, lots of details still will need to be worked out. If they are worked out speedily and in the spirit of compromise, goodwill, unity which they have manifested, fine, the bazooka will have been there. Mm-hmm. If after this initial step, in a few weeks, people are wrangling on, no, I think that's what they meant, and not, I think that's what they meant, then we'll have a problem. And I hope that this time implementation will be as swift as it should be.
But you hope, but what's your calculation? What's your forecast?
I'm not sure about that. I think the odds are that it will happen, not least because markets will be watching this very carefully. The holders of European debt will be watching this very carefully. So I think the pressure will be there. But the experience has also proved that it sometimes takes time. And until and unless the Europeans cross this next frontier, which is putting into the European system a number of fiscal or economic decision-making capacity, we will still live with the risk of one national parliament not ratifying or hesitating to ratify this or this or this part of the deal.
You're speaking there of more Eurozone integration.
I mean, I'm convinced about this. What this Greek crisis has shown is that the level of real interdependence within the Eurozone was higher than was acknowledged politically, institutionally in the European system. The solidarity was higher than the disciplines. Disciplines have to be installed at EU level, and for this, you need once more to move in the direction of a bit more of supranationality.
What does more supranationality mean? Does that mean more power for the European Commission?
It means delegating more authority to this European system, which is the European Commission, which takes the initiatives, which enforces the decisions, under the parliamentary scrutiny the Council of Member States, with the Senate in the European Union and the European Parliament, which is the house in the European system.
What's your forecast when it comes to the global economy? How close are we to a potential double-dip recession? What kind of signs are you seeing? You're looking at this, of course, from a trade perspective.
Well, risks are still clearly on the downside. We in the World Trade Organization had to revise our trade forecast from this year downwards. And the reason for that is that what we saw at the beginning of the year, which was relatively low growth in Europe, US, Japan, but vibrant growth in emerging countries, as could be expected, this pattern is not very sustainable because part of the vibrant growth in emerging countries stems from their exports to developed countries. Mm-hmm. And we've seen recently a bit of less of what was expected in China, India, or Latin America. So the odds are that if Europe, US, Japan slow down, which overall is the consensus, then this will have an impact on the growth of emerging countries, which is why, although US and EU have to do a huge package of fiscal restraint in order to reduce a debt which itself hampers growth of the future, they also have to keep investing in the future. And what's the right mix between fiscal constraint and growth? That's what the G20 next week in Cannes is about.
You're talking there of the rebalancing act that's currently taking place in the global economy away from the developed world to the emerging economies. Are you then saying that the emerging economies at this stage perhaps are not ready to shoulder the weight of the global economy just yet and to drive growth?
I mean, they've done that already. If you look at world output this year, although the size of the overall size of emerging economies is still smaller than the overall size of developed economy, if you look at growth, half of world output is with developed countries, half is now with developing countries. So they've taken half of the job, and the question is whether this is sustainable in a situation where developed countries are slowing down, which basically leads to a question, which is whether a country like China, for instance, can substitute the growth they'll lose with fewer exports with more domestic consumption. That's what the Chinese leadership tells they have to do. Whether they succeed in doing this remains to be seen.
Now, if we go back to the Eurozone crisis a little bit and to the role of the emerging economies and China in the Eurozone crisis, Eurozone leaders, they're basically going cap in hand to emerging economies, asking them to invest in a special investment fund that's being set up in connection with the Eurozone's bailout fund, the EFSF. Are you optimistic that the emerging economies will actually want to invest in this investment fund?
I mean, if I were them, that's what I would do. If I had $1 trillion of available cash, I'd put it, what the Chinese have done, in US Treasury bonds. I'd put it in other European sovereign debt bond. But if I have something which has a better guarantee than Italy or Spain or France or UK or Sweden, if I have something of a higher ranking, of course I'll buy it, because I need to diversify my reserves. I have lots of assets, and the question is not whether I have to invest or not. I have to invest. The question is where. And I think, given what I have in my portfolio in US Treasury bonds, doing a bit more in EU federal bonds is something I would do.
So they're looking at this with a cold, hard business sense.
I'm convinced that's the case. I mean, I've never seen people on the bond markets working with philanthropy or politics. These guys are accountable, and especially in China, where, contrary to what happens in the West, the question of what the central bank does with the Chinese reserves is a matter of heavy debate in public opinion.
Just one more issue when it comes to Russia. Russia, of course, is trying to become a member of the World Trade Organization. When do you think that will happen? Negotiations have been ongoing now for more than a decade.
Much more than a decade. They've been going on for 18 years. Now, the odds are, as of today, that this will be done by the end of this year, and that Russia's accession to the WTO should be gaveled at the ministerial conference we will have in Geneva mid-December. But for a few remaining issues, and notably a Swiss mediation between Georgia, which is a member of the WTO, and Russia, which is not yet a member of the WTO, on a bilateral issue which they have to solve. For the moment, this is the only remaining obstacle, as I see it from where I am, to Russia joining by the end of this year.
All right, Pascal Lamy, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Thanks very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us here at France 24. And with that, we're going to wrap up the program. Thanks for watching.